Alright, ladies and gents, let's talk New World. I've been playing this game a little bit late to the bandwagon, if I'm honest, and I think that's a bit of an understatement. This game has been out for quite a while. It was introduced under a very, very bad reception. A lot of bugs, a lot of things missing, just a lot of things that people weren't satisfied with. So, to me, jumping into this game now, what are we now, 2025? I was kind of a little bit jaded about New World, if I'm honest, from the off, but with every game that I try on this channel, I try to put my own feelings, my own, I guess, preconceived opinions to one side, and generally give the game a decent shot. For any of you that aren't familiar with the format here on the channel, I tend to do a couple of impressions on video games. One initial first impression, which is normally circa 10 to 15 hours of gameplay, and then something a bit more fleshed out later on down the line. If we're covering MMOs, it's very hard to give a final impression of an MMO because, of course, it's a live service game, but that's typically the format that I tend to fall under. What I tend to do whilst playing these sort of games is I'm quite old-fashioned. I use a bit of a notepad and just write down some pros and cons in no real order, just kind of raw thoughts as I'm feeling them, as I'm experiencing them, and then what I'll do is I'll stop in an ideal location and kind of give those thoughts to you guys in a video format. As you can see from where we are now, we've just finished our first expedition, which, by the way, really enjoyable for the most part, and we'll go into that shortly. But I feel like this was quite a decent cut-off point to just sort of stop and give you my honest thoughts and feelings of circa the first 15 to 20 hours of gameplay. Now, I have about 50 hours of gameplay recorded on my Steam library, and that's across a couple of different characters. I have dabbled with this game in the past, but nothing really serious, to be honest. This is the first real shot that I've actually given New World. We'll start with the pros foot. I always like to start, I guess, on a positive foot. The sound team, the team behind the sound development of this game, phenomenal. Absolutely, really, really nailed it. From the open world atmospheric sounds, to the creatures, to the enemies, to even just simply the sounds of you mining a rock. You can hear the echoes sort of bouncing off of like canyon walls. It's almost like a gunshot. It's really, really cool. I like a lot of the enemy sounds. For example, there's a lot of like corrupted, cursed soldiers that kind of sound like Darth Vader. And as they're like chasing you, you can hear that sort of sound echoing through their helmet, which is really, really nice. All in all, really, really adds to the experience. I don't normally focus in on sound too much when I'm playing video games, but I must admit that really jumped out to me with New World. Not to touch on just the sound effects, but also the music as well. The music in this game, mainly like the ambient music, is really, really nice. It kind of gives me like, not quite as strong, but a bit of an Oblivion-esque kind of feel to it. It's kind of hearty, very sort of like foresty, sort of like heartwarming music, which is quite nice. And then as you dive deeper into some of these expeditions, the music changes slightly. And I feel like what they've done with the different choices of music is really, really good. Moving on to combat. Combat was always something that I had a real point of contention against in this game when I tried it first and foremost. I found that initially a lot of my weapon attacks, perhaps I was using the wrong weapon, just felt really like weightless. It just felt like I was sort of smacking enemies with a wet noodle and damage was appearing. But I kind of changed up the weapons I was using this time. I'm primarily using a bow, as you can see, but I do have a hatchet. I'll be honest, the hatchet for me probably still falls under the wet noodle spec, just because of when you're using Berserk, you're just kind of like flurrying enemies, and it just feels a little bit off. I kind of enjoy a bit more tactical sort of combat. I like with the bow placing my shots. I've got a damage multiplier on headshots. And that's just really, really nice. The combat this time around has actually genuinely really surprised me. It's really, really quite enjoyable. The arrows, for example, when they land, they feel really good. For example, as someone that's a Dark Souls player, Elden Ring player, Demon Souls player, I've always enjoyed the idea of if I can dodge an attack, I should be able to. And honestly, the iframes when rolling, there are some moments where it catches you off guard a little bit and it clips through due to server tick, but for the most part, it's pretty good. If you roll out of the way of an attack, stereotypically you will actually dodge it, which is always positive in a game like this. Speaking of combat, enemies seem to have a plethora of different skills to use against you, whether it be sort of gap closers, whether it be they leap towards you, some of them have got shields that you need to break through, so it does feel like the combat encounters are a little bit dynamic. I will say, I am going to split this into pros and cons, but I do try and give a little caveat to each pro if I can, if it comes to my mind. The enemies in combat, sometimes if you're shooting them with a bow and you hit a headshot as they stagger, they like hard reset, which can be really jarring to kind of track a target if you're using a bow or a musket, for example. I find that if you hit them in the head, they'll stagger back, and then automatically it's like someone's just hitting the reset button on the mob and they're just like T-posing, running towards you. So that can be, a little bit off. But all in all, really, the combat's been great. It really has been great. The open world, let's talk about that because the game is called New World. The open world is really, really nice. Actually, really, really impressive. The graphics are great. Admittedly, you can make the game look pretty ugly depending on your PC and depending on your spec. But for the most part, I tend to run anything from sort of medium to high settings. Nothing crazy. I still want the game to run at a decent FPS rate, but I also want it to look fairly good. The view distance blew me away. I'm going to be honest, like being able to, I've always been into games where if I can see it, I want to be able to go to it. And New World, for the most part, does that. It does that really, really well. And it incorporates in the movement with the world, which I really like. Being able to mantle and jump in this game is huge. It might seem like a really stupid thing to say, like, oh, great, you can jump. But there are so many games where you just can't, and it is so immersion breaking. And with New World, your exploration in the world often rewards you. It might not be something great. It might just be little parchments or, herbs, collectibles. But there's always something that tends to reward your exploration. I found that in many cases, the world is often too good because it kind of leads you to just follow your nose and ignore questing altogether. The amount of times that I've said to myself, right, I'm going to run to this quest. I'm just going to do this quest. And then some hemp pops up, or a rabbit that I need to skin pops up, or I need to mine some ore or a collectible. I just find for my brain, I just want to do all of those things at once, and then I end up getting absolutely nothing done. And that is a merit to the world building and the team that put it together. Now, what would combat and a world be without skills to progress? And this game, I'll be honest, really, really impressed me with skills. I've always strayed away stereotypically from like life skills in a lot of games. I tend to just focus on combat, mainly because a lot of life skills don't give you real XP, and in New World, not the case. Every herb you pick up, every tree that you chop down, every ore that you mine, you get XP. You get your life skill XP and your combat XP as well. You won't get XP for like your weapons, for example, but you'll get like, as you can see, I'm 26 into 27 now on my level just here. You'll get XP for that. This really incentivized me to just go out and just pick up different things and do different things that I wouldn't stereotypically normally do. I even found myself going back to town and then changing those materials into other things, selling them on the market, getting involved in a whole different ecosystem that I wouldn't normally be bothered about. Much like RuneScape, the more that you progress your levels, you start to unlock different things to do within those categories. For example, with gathering, you can pick different herbs. Some of the herbs in this game look really, really cool. Some of them have got like lightning and fire pouring out of them. For mining, for example, you can then mine different ores, and with each new tier comes a different value to it, whether it be a monetary value or a crafting value too. Now, we touched a little bit on movement earlier, but I do just want to add a little caveat to that, which is mounting. Now, I understand mounts came a lot later into this game, which was a big point of contention with the community, but I must say, my experience with mounts, pretty good. I love the fact that it doesn't force you to stand still to call your mount. Like, there are so many games where you have to kind of stand still for 3 seconds, get on your horse to get off. You're only traveling 2 minutes down the road, and it's just a bit jarring. This really seamless. The mounts at the moment, I'm sure this changes later on. They don't move as fast as I potentially want them to. It seems that you've got a bit of a difference between the mount speed when you're on the road and when you're off-road, which I totally understand. But even the on-road speed at the moment still feels a little bit slow, but perhaps that gets fleshed out the more you level up. Now, of course, sitting here doing a first impressions for New World, I'm not going to be at endgame, but what I can touch on is my first experience of expeditions, which we briefly touched on at the beginning of the video. As I said, it's been a pretty good experience. There is a group finder from what I was, from what I managed to use. It was pretty easy. You select which expedition you use. I believe I pressed O here. Went on activities, and it comes up just here, and then you can queue for it. Really easy stuff. Found a group within 30 seconds. The only thing I would say is a lot of the groups, at least that I've experienced, are all level 65. So you do kind of just plow through everything quite quickly. But what I will say is the expedition that I'm in right now, the mapping, the design of it, the world building of it seems really, really good. I enjoy the theme, the depth to it, the kind of horizontal, vertical progression. The gear from it is really, really great. It always feels really, really good to get new gear in New World, whether you're picking it up, whether you can use it or not. That's a huge string in the game's bow. And Expeditions just flesh that out a little bit more. You're introduced to enemies that you otherwise wouldn't really see. The boss at the end, this is going to sound like more of a negative, to be honest. The boss kind of just got rinsed because of the leveling. I would have liked, if I'm honest, to have seen some sort of level cap. You know, you can only enter this dungeon at level, 25 to 30 or whatever. I feel like that would incentivize people to, I guess, play together a little bit more, as everyone just kind of AoE'd and destroyed everything. But it is what it is. I'm coming into a game that's been out for quite a while. What can I expect? It does seem, as much as this game doesn't follow like a class-based system, it still follows the holy trinity of tanks, healers, and DPS as you kind of select that as you load in, which is really cool. If I'm being completely real though, due to me just being inexperienced, I know there's some logos that pop up just here to show you like who's the tank, but because everyone looks the same for the most part and everyone's just using the same weapons, it's kind of hard to follow what's going on. There were a lot of people that weren't even the tank that were just plowing through enemies anyway, so I guess just due to gear it doesn't really matter at this level. Finishing up then on some of the cons, and I'll try not lean into these too much. I do try and spread as much positivity about games as I can when I try them, but one real standout point to me is the cosmetics in this game, both paid and non-paid, are terrible, dude. Like, I've never played a game where so many endgame characters look dreadful, from crazy color palettes to just really weak looking armor sets. I think I saw in my whole time playing maybe 1-2 people that had really cool like paladin armor, but for the most part everyone's running about in gimp suits and people looking like Spider-Man. I don't know, like I'm really, really into class fantasy and like fashion souls, for example. That's kind of that's just sort of me. But a lot of people in this game seem to just look very, very odd. Maybe that's a choice. I don't know if that's your cup of tea. No hate, but for me personally, kind of really turns me off when I see a world where people are just dressed as whatever. I'm big into immersion, so trying to have that elevated fantasy feel is what I tend to go for. Some weapons are great to swing, like the Great Axe, for example, but obviously some weapons just really don't complement the combat in this game, and I do find that the server ticks can really mess up the combat sometimes, and it's just so weird that you can be in such a flow state with the combat, like for example with my bow where everything's hitting, you feel great, you feel like Legolas reborn, and then other times you just can't hit anything because enemies are rubber banding from left, right, and center. It just feels a little bit off. I would love for that to be a little bit more consistent. One thing I haven't really touched on so far is the story. To me, I don't gravitate massively towards story in MMOs other than like Final Fantasy XIV, but that's because the whole game to me was basically the story. But the story in New World, I have tried watching a lot of the cutscenes and reading the text, but it's just so difficult to really care about. Initially there was a curse, the land was cursed, a sorceress was blamed for it, they were trying to get to the bottom of it, trying to speak to the druids to see what they thought, whether they were, messing up the angry earth or whatever it was. And after a while, I'm going to be honest, there was a guy that I was speaking to that looked kind of like a ball sack. I think he was called Jonas. He kind of looked like Deadpool. And at this point I thought, yeah, I'm probably not that interested, to be honest. The rest of the game, luckily, is so good that it doesn't really matter if you're not that into the story. So if I've got some story fiends watching, the story of New World, by all means, let me have it in the comments, let me know. But no hate if you enjoy the story, but for me as a new player, it just really wasn't that enjoyable or that digestible. I guess my last parting comment would be that I understand, the monetary value of companies needing to make money. There does seem to be a lot of monetization options in the game. Obviously, there's no subscription fee, so I get it, they've got to make the money somewhere. But from the bits that I have seen at a glance, it does seem that you could dig pretty deep within your wallet if you want to buy certain mounts or cosmetics, which, let's be honest, cosmetics for most of us is the end game. So I'm going to assume if you're going to play this long term, you're probably going to spend a little bit. But that's not so much a negative as such. It's more just a case of if you're playing this for the first time and you really get into it, just be careful because there are a lot of games out there where you can spend a lot of money on. They won't really benefit you in any shape or form. Now, lastly, I guess this is more a con to me because that's what I look for in video games, and maybe I'm just looking in all the wrong places for New World, but it doesn't seem to be, at least right now, much of a social MMO. From standing in the middle of town to passing people out in the open world to joining them in expeditions, I have had very, very little interactions and responses back. You know, there's been a couple of people I've said hi to, which have been really cool, but for the most part, I feel like people are just kind of stuck in the motions of the grind. You know, they've played this game for a long time. They're not really interested. Maybe they're communicating in Discord. It's probably hard for me to comment with such a small amount of time in the game. But yeah, again, first impressions of New World. I'm going to be honest, right now, I don't understand why this game gets so much hate. I'm sure that will be shown to me later on in the game. I do wish there was more people playing the game. It seems that the concurrent players on Steam, of course, isn't the end of the world. This game's on console now, it's cross-platform, but the player base compared to other MMOs does seem to be a little bit lower. It would be cool if that was fleshed out a little bit more, because all in all, I'm going to be honest, right now, very, very solid MMO. Still enjoying it, still going to carry on playing it. Yeah, I guess in my head, I can't really see why this game gets so much hate. I understand beforehand with all the issues, the bugs, all that sort of stuff going on, but right now, I would absolutely recommend New World to a lot of people that ask me. But yeah, just a few thoughts. I will follow this video up with something a bit more fleshed out once I've played it a little bit more. And if you enjoy, like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.